If you have a matching gift, tell me who it's from. Don't tell me it's an anonymous donor. Don't tell me that it has no dollar cap. I know that's not true.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange, a podcast from IPM Advancement. We believe strong nonprofits can change the world, and our goal with each episode is to bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders from the nonprofit sector. Let's get started. Welcome, listeners, to the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. I'm your host, Russ Fanoff. Today, we are unpacking the highlights from Giving USA 2025. Our goal is to help you understand the trends and shifts in philanthropy to make the most of your year-end fundraising and prepare for next year. But remember, people, that this is the giant macro philanthropic look at the numbers. And so please don't get too worked up about this. These numbers are the big numbers. They're the billions and billions of dollars from all these sources of individuals and foundations and corporations. We're going to focus on the individuals today in this conversation. And it's a great opportunity to just kind of look at your program, take stock in things as you're getting toward the end of the year and looking to next year. We're going to have a great conversation about what you can look at, what you can maybe gain some efficiencies in. We're going to make some recommendations, and hopefully you'll get a lot out of the conversation. So joining me today, two wonderful people. First, Samantha Timlick. She is the partner and CEO of IPM Advancement and no stranger to NPFX. Welcome back, Samantha.
Happy to be here, Russ.
And Dr. Colton Strawser is president of Colton Strawser Consulting and also a returning guest. Great to have you back, Colton.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me back.
So just to set the context, Americans gave an estimated $592.5 billion in 2024. That is up 6.3% over the previous year in 2023. And that money came from individuals. Top of the list, $392.45 billion. That's about 2/3 of all giving. Foundations were next at $109.8 billion. That was up 2.4% over the previous year. Bequests at $45.84 billion, down a little bit, 1.6%. And corporations at $44.4 billion, which were up 9.1% from the previous year. Giving is top heavy. 3.1% of donors, those major / supersized givers, account for over 75% of the dollars raised. The big takeaway is the same story we've been hearing for years now. Micro gifts, those $100 and lower donors, are declining. This year, down 8.8%. Small gifts from $101 to $500, down 4%. Mid-level gifts, those $501 to $5,000 donors, down 1.2%. And donor retention is slipping, down 2.6%. But your long-term donors still make up 60% of all giving. So it's important to keep those long-term donors engaged. So I'd like to just begin this conversation by talking about what it means for nonprofits to be experiencing this shift, that wealthy donors are giving more, smaller donors are giving less. What does it mean to re-engage these everyday donors? And how do you balance that cultivation of big donors with the retention of smaller, more loyal donors?
I wanted to jump in on this one first, Russ. For me, I think that these findings really highlight, it highlights a lot, but one thing it really highlights for me is the importance of your major gift program and processes. Mm-hmm. They need to be flexible because you've got to be able to meet people where they are, but they also need to be scalable. And they need to be tracked in a way that helps hold everyone accountable. So it's a lot to sort of unpack, but basically, there are lots of ways that nonprofits can utilize their annual fund, which is what they're primarily using for these small donors and moving them up the pipeline. They can use the annual fund in a way that helps supplement their major gift outreach. And particularly when it comes to stewardship and cultivation, right? You're already putting a mailing out there. Maybe it's not appropriate for your large dollar donors in terms of asking them for money, but can you give them an update?
Yep.
Can you take that appeal package that has hopefully this very compelling story and, talks about the sort of the people that you're helping? Can you just take the asks out and turn it into a stewardship touch point that's showing people, here is what we're doing with your gift?
Yeah.
And again, the important thing is no asks, right? Maybe your reply form is in the envelope in case they want to give, but instead of putting asks on it, you put a thank you message or something to that effect.
Yeah, I think, one of the things, I'll give folks a peek behind the curtain at IPM Advancement. One of the things that we've been doing a lot more with our clients is, obviously we do a lot of letter versions when we drop an appeal, and more of our letter versioning takes out those asks and just converts it to a stewardship letter. Mm-hmm. And so we'll identify those segments within a drop that are really just folks that need to hear a thank you. They're higher level givers. They're folks who might have maybe just recently given, but they need to hear some of that storytelling. They need to get the sense that their gift is hard at work. It's doing things for the organization and its beneficiaries, and they can't be ignored. So a lot of organizations, what they'll do is they'll get that donor, they'll kind of have it in their heads that, oh, we've got that relationship now. We don't need to talk to these people, right? They got their thank you, they got their receipt. And what happens is those people over time might feel disconnected from the organization and its work. And so that's the exact opposite of what you want to do. You want to keep people engaged. We know that recency drives giving. And so we want to keep them engaged, even if you're not asking them for money.
Absolutely. And another good segment for that would be like your monthly donors, right? These are people who are already giving to you. It is worthwhile to go back to them and ask for a special gift from time to time, but not every time. And the other thing that is really nice about this approach is it starts to train your donors that just because they're getting something from you in the mail, it doesn't necessarily have an ask in it.
Yeah.
You might just be wrapping back. And so that way your envelopes show up and it's not this, I don't even need to open this. I know what it is. That's the last thing that you want. So yes.
Yeah. Colton's over there raising the roof.
No, absolutely. It's, I swear sometimes I get things in the mail and I'm like, oh, I don't even need to open it. And sometimes I do just in case they have the return address labels that I really like to get every once in a while. But for the most part, every time I get mail, I know what it's for. And so that's sort of, it would be nice to get an update every now and then versus hey, thanks for giving. Would you like to give again? Hey, thanks for giving. Would you like to give again?
Yeah.
And it's just a constant cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. People are providing money to an idea. When we invest in Google, Apple, or any other stock, we're hoping for dividends. And with nonprofits, we're getting social dividends, if we want to call them that.
Yeah.
And, we're investing in our communities, hoping they do well by the donation. But I also think you mentioned something really interesting. We're not talking just all about the nonprofit. I view nonprofits as conduits. And so you're helping to make the good happen within communities, whatever that's local, global, whatever. And I think we forget a lot of times that, we're asking people to invest in this idea and people want to know what that investment means. A $10,000 gift or a $100 gift, both are essential in their own ways. And while I do hate the phrase, every little bit helps, it actually is valid at the end of the day for, organizations to have that annual fund so they can meet their day-to-day needs, but also have those donors they can go to if they need to make maybe large purchases or renovations or, expanding services, piloting a new program. So having those available donors is important as well, while letting, still letting your $100, donors know the really cool thing that happened at the school backpack giveaway.
So let me ask you, what else, if anything, from the report really surprised you?
I would say that it's going back to what Samantha mentioned about having a policy and procedure. Mm-hmm. I've been in a lot of different fundraising shops as a professional and as a consultant, and sometimes I'm blown away by the lack of structure that happens within some fundraising shops where I'm like, how do you send even a letter or how do you track anything? Bless you all, but you're doing it very wrong. The fundraising cycle exists for a reason between
Yeah.
recognition and stewardship and cultivation. Like there are best practices for a reason. And, I've had nonprofits not send thank you notes, or I've had them
Yeah.
only send, letters when they need money. I think about it as we talk about relationships all the time in fundraising, and it's so important in building relationships with foundations and corporations and individuals. While it's all a little different, it's still building relationships and not viewing donors as an ATM. I think of it as like the great aunt we only reach out to around Christmas hoping to get a new PS5. Like,
Yeah.
we really need to connect with people and let them know what we're up to throughout the year so they don't forget about us. And, if they are motivated to give, we're at the top of their list rather than, that agency that in some cases I know they only send out one notice a year, usually on like the community giving day.
Yeah.
My coworker got 40 some emails from nonprofits we hadn't heard of all year. And it's like, hey, it's giving day. Would you like to remember us? And I'm like, well, you didn't remember me 364 days. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you another question too. And this one was prompted by a visit I had this weekend with my mom, who just got into her 80s. We were talking about her estate plan, and of course, like, she doesn't want to talk about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that was a takeaway for me from the report was, giving by bequests has declined just a little bit by 1.6%. And then adjusted for inflation, that decline was 4.4%, which to me was striking because we see, that boomer population is it's pretty large, right? And there's a lot of older people. So you think that number would be going up.
Mm-hmm.
So any thoughts on that?
I had an estate attorney once tell me, isn't it great just to talk about death and dying all day? Death, dying, and incapacity. And so, it's not fun to talk about, but
yeah,
I think having a reframing, we always talk about legacy giving and everything. And, instead of talking about the end, talking about sort of the extension of the life and viewing it from a more positive way. I have a lot of folks that tell me, I don't want to talk about estate planning. And when that comes up, I'm like, well, you're mentioning all your donors are older. Your major donors are older. Like, you're having some people fall off because they've died out. It's important to have these conversations with folks. And, it's not hard to get a will. There's so many resources out there to get, free wills and, think about estate planning. But in some cases, I recognize it's a knowledge gap, which I always recommend reaching out to your local community foundation, who in many cases are local experts on plan giving. And that's what they're there to help with. And they, if you can get those donors into a door of a community foundation, they'll talk about the death and dying.
Yeah.
You can talk about your gift can do this for a long period of time, and you've been our supporter forever. And so if your organization's been around for, say, 30 or more years, it's time to think about those folks that are 50 or more years older, thinking about estate planning. And it could be a percentage, it could be a set amount, just say everyone gave 10% of their, estate towards nonprofits. That would be a lot. A little bit can go a long way when it comes to estates, and not to, say, oh, well, they only give $1,000 a year. We shouldn't talk to them about planned giving. I'm like, well, they could give you their entire estate, which is a lot more than $1,000.
Yeah. And it seems to me like there are opportunities to kind of ease into it with your audiences. There's Write a Will Month. There's other ways to kind of message to your younger donors, quote unquote, younger donors, right? Your 50 plus donors. And that's an opportunity. If you have those things on the calendar where you can go out and, maybe like we look at the month of July, the month of August as opportunities to go out where it's not a great fundraising month for annual giving, but that might be a good month to go out or have some placement in a newsletter where you're talking about it.
Yeah. And if you can just add, adding a buck slip insert on a direct mail package is generally pretty cost effective. You can go real simple, no color, and add that in there. And thinking about things, again, doing double duty wherever possible. We have a client who every year in fall, they include an insert about their planned giving, their legacy society in their direct mail package, and they always have us print extra. And then they take those extras to events, to mostly events, but when they're putting together grab bags, whatever, it's a simple, easy thing that people can pick up, take with them if they're interested, very low cost. And you're spreading it via different vehicles, so you're getting more bang for your buck in that way.
That's actually an excellent segue, because I'd like to talk a little bit about direct mail. And it seems to be holding steady with boomers, and we're seeing a little bit of interest in millennials. So we see that there's some cross-channel activity in what's happening with direct mail and digital giving. As fundraisers, we like to split it up because we want to track what's happening in direct mail, and we want to track what's happening in digital, and we want to keep those in nice boxes so we can track them separately. But what happens in the real world is someone gets a direct mail piece and then they go online to make their gift. Or vice versa. They get an email and then they look in their mailbox and voila, there is a direct mail piece that they open up, and then they read the direct mail appeal, and then, they respond that way. There's a lot of cross-channel pollination happening. So what we see happening in this report and others is you've got 28% of boomers who said they were giving online after receiving a direct mail appeal, compared with only 18% of Gen X, 17% of millennials, and 16% of Gen Z. To me, that's still okay. You're like 1 out of 5 of even the younger generations are still taking action digitally after getting a mail piece. That's still pretty good. What are your thoughts on that?
A lot of nonprofits get hung up on the idea of integration. It seems like the clients we talk to are in one of two schools. They're either all about wanting to integrate and they have no idea how, or they don't care about it at all and they think it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And neither one is really a great place to be. So what I wanted to do is just share some sort of easy getting started things that most nonprofits can probably start doing tomorrow to start integrating their program here. So a really easy one, and Russ, you sort of alluded to this, is pre and post emails. When we are sending out a direct mail package, for anyone that we have an email address, we give them a heads up that it's coming. It's got a picture of the envelope and it basically says, mail is coming. This is what it's going to look like.
Yep.
And then we do a post DM email approximately 2 to 3 weeks after the piece hits, saying, we hope you got it, maybe sharing some of what was in the piece and soliciting a donation. So usually the pre-DM email, there is no solicitation. People can click on that envelope and make a gift right then and there, of course. But the post-DM email really kind of closes it up and makes an ask. If you've got an aggressive mail program, you're not going to want to do both of those with every drop. Maybe you do it just 4 or 5 times a year, but we have seen that consistently improve response to the mail itself and generate a handful of individual gifts. So I would say that's a really easy one most nonprofits can do. If you don't have email addresses for folks in your direct mail universe, it's probably because it's not on your reply form. Add it. Give people a way to sign up for your newsletters, something easy, a low barrier that you can overcome and deliver something that would make them want to share their email address.
Yep.
Appeal-specific landing pages. Bonus points if you include a QR code that lets you take advantage of postal discounts. I know the USPS is always changing things on us, but they have got a pretty solid discount if you use informed delivery along with a QR code. And we have some clients really personalize these landing pages. They add videos, they add extra details on the story. When you can do that, do it. If all you can do is include a picture that was, on your envelope and put that on your landing page along with your donate form, do that. It's a very, again, low, easy way to kind of get people engaged both digitally and online. 2 more for you. Social media wrap back. Whenever you're asking people to do something that's not just give a donation, and you can report back on what you did. So for example, petitions, how many petitions did you collect? Can you post a video of someone walking them up the steps, to Capitol Hill where they're going to go be delivered? Just closing the loop with donors so they know, okay, this nonprofit did something with the action that I took, makes them more willing to take those actions in the future.
Yeah.
And then sort of dovetailing on that, simple videos. So yeah, showing, your CEO walking up the steps to the Capitol with a pile of petitions. Great. Behind the scenes videos at events. We've got a client that does a lot of handing out food and whatnot. And they just recently did this great video behind the scenes of their volunteers preparing the food and then showing them physically giving it to people who are being immediately impacted. Very low budget, easy to do, but just another good way to sort of start bringing in some of that digital side of things that can seem overwhelming.
Excellent. Colton.
Yeah, to add to that, do you know how many emails I get a day?
Yeah, right.
I don't have time to read every nonprofit's appeal that I get in my inbox. And so having something physical will stand out.
Yeah.
For me, when it comes to direct mail, it actually has to be dynamic. I tell my clients all the time, every time I see a fundraising appeal on organization letterhead, I die a little inside because it's just so boring and bland. And it looks like, I don't know, like a summons, like it's very cold and, businessy. And I would rather have it be a story or have photos, infographics, something to inspire rather than just sending a letter that says like, hey, friend, we need your donation again. Please send it in. But you're right. With direct mail, that sometimes prompts me to then go online and then, make a donation that way with my credit card or shout out if you use Apple Pay. That makes my life very easy. And so, I'm not just going to stumble across some donation page on your website and be like, oh, I'm inspired. Generally, something's going to push me there.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the postcard because you can quickly see what the mail is. I got a lot of junk mail. I don't get any bills. I just get random catalogs and postcards and, the occasional thing from an insurance company saying, hey, switch to Allstate, or some other insurance company that has not sponsored this podcast. And so,
yes, that's right.
Not sponsored by Allstate. But, having something where it's maybe a picture of your summer program, sending it home from camp, or maybe you're an animal shelter. I worked with one where they had some of the pets write from their perspective on here's what's happening in the shelter, or, really just being creative to share your impact and outcomes that you're achieving because of these donations versus just saying we're a great nonprofit. We're still a 501c3. We didn't go bankrupt last year. Please write a check today. And so just making it more personal and more meaningful, and then inspiring me to go to whatever, send a check in, do an online gift or something, rather than just reminding me hey, you did this before. It's time to do it again. How you're supposed to go to the dentist every 6 months.
Hi, this is Curtis Schmidt, producer of the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. If you're a nonprofit professional who has questions about your program, or maybe you feel like you've taken your advocacy, fundraising, or membership effort as far as you can and you need some fresh ideas, then we have a special offer for you today. NPFX podcast listeners can get a free 30-minute consultation with IPM Advancement, no strings attached, when you go to ipmadvancement.com/free. Just enter a few details and an IPM team member will contact you to follow up. It's that easy. That website again is ipmadvancement.com/free. Thanks for listening, and we hope to talk to you soon. Now let's return to the episode.
So let's dive just a little bit deeper on direct mail and talk about retention and re-engaging lapsed donors. So we all know it's very expensive to get a brand new donor who has never heard of your organization on the file. Stats that we're looking at from Giving USA indicate that we've got most organizations pulling in about a 50% renewal rate on their donors from year to year. Many organizations are only recapturing about 40% of their donors year over year. So that means donors are lapsing. How can we improve retention?
From my perspective, there are really two key components for direct mail engagement, and especially for lapsed donors, and those are consistency and personalization. So as far as consistency, you don't want to just do the same thing over and over again. I'm not saying that, but you should have anchor mailings.
Yeah.
Times when donors can expect to hear from you each year.
Right.
Even the smallest nonprofits can typically mail spring, fall, and year end.
Yes.
So get those on the calendar, figure out about when they're going to go out, and start thinking about what they might be about. You kind of know what might be coming up for your nonprofit, or maybe you have a cyclical need with the community you're serving. Plan around that accordingly. Even if you're not soliciting donors, like we talked about before, send them a thank you only version, but get them something so that they know it's coming. They can generally count on it. Staying in front of them is critical. So that's the consistency side. Next is personalization. Personalization goes a really long way in making your outreach personal. Imagine that. You can start really simple too. Just segmenting your data into current donors, people who have given in the last 12 months, and people who haven't given in the last 12 months. A very simple recency select makes a huge difference for most nonprofits. And then take your letter that you have written, once everyone has approved it, everyone's happy with it, and change a few sentences. So instead of speaking to a donor who has given recently, you're speaking to someone who hasn't given in a while. You're going to use terms like renew, come back, join us again, remind them of the difference that they made, and invite them to come back and give again. That's sort of very baseline, right? Just talking to them based on recency. And then from there, you can start getting into more stuff. Of course, we're using the donor name, I hope. I hope we're making ask amounts based on what they have given in the past instead of just some sort of static string. And then you can start doing things like call out the city and state they're from. You're mailing them. You have that information. It's a very easy thing to pop, but it just makes it so much more personal when, you're asking Samantha to help support people in Gilbert, Arizona, as opposed to sort of just nationwide. So again, consistency, personalization. I think those two things, start there and you will be surprised at how much your retention rates improve.
Excellent. Colton.
So one of the things with personalization is, what I like to do, especially when working with like corporate donors or individual donors to go back for renewal, is let them know what they gave last year, because oftentimes they will forget. And so in a recent renewal I've been doing is, it's like, thank you again for supporting us. Last year, you generously supported us at this level. And when we're going in for the renewal, for many of them, we're asking for the same amount, but for others, we're maybe like trying to up it a little bit. And so I think it's helpful because, people are getting a lot of different appeals, especially at year end. You're like, okay, did I give to the food bank last year? How much did I give to the food bank? And, if you're like me and don't keep your check book up to date, or you don't want to go back and look at your credit card from last year, it's helpful to have sort of that range as well. One thing I like to think about direct mail, and we've talked a little bit about this, is I really look at it as more of an education piece in some instances where, sometimes, people will give to you here and there, but letting them know that the problem your organization's working on is still a problem. And that's where sort of your meaningful local data can help individuals connect back to your organization. Maybe they've lapsed, or maybe they're the type of donor that moves to a new issue every couple of years. But if your crime rate's up, or your domestic violence, number of cases is increasing, if foster care is increasing, like if the problem is getting better, worse, or otherwise due to your work or lack of, because you don't have enough money to serve everybody, I think that's really important. And so I'm a data-driven nerd. So I like to know about, what's different or what's not because of an agency's services. And so, illustrating that there, is a change in the problem, or that things are moving over time, can really help, someone decide to come back as a donor or to increase in donations. And so really having that data available is helpful.
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue. Let's talk about what resonates specifically across generations. And when you are going out to these disparate audiences, what resonates across various target audiences without fragmenting your message?
I think it's really looking at sharing your impact stories, or just the impact of your organization in different formats to convey your message effectively. I think some agencies, like, they view things as like campaigns that all need to happen at the same time.
Yeah.
And so, like, I love it when I get a text message, an email, a Facebook notification, a letter in the mail that literally tells me all the same thing. And if you're trying to do that, great, awesome. It could be effective. In other cases, I'm probably going to unsubscribe from 3 of those platforms and then forget about the 4th. So in some cases, it's like sprinkling things throughout. And, whether you have 3 different stories on different platforms or, just kind of sharing your messages in different ways, but, having things be thematically connected, or maybe your appeal features one story, but when you go to your website, it features another additional story. Or I like a little teaser where it's like, hey, to learn more about this, a conclusion of this story, click here. And that takes you to your website where there's just like so conveniently this like little donate button at the bottom of the story. And you're like, oh, wow, how did that get there? And so the more you can do to engage people and, recognize what's happening. Whenever I look at a client's social media, I count the number of recent posts that are all about fundraising and those that are about here's what we do as a nonprofit. And if they have too many in the give today, give tomorrow, give next week, give yesterday, I'm like, okay, well, we need to like gently push people towards maybe like, hey, if you like wanted to help. So many of those soft asks versus the like, hey, give today. You need a bit of both.
Yeah.
Social media is supposed to be social. And so having some stories on those things is important. And that can get to different generations, which, I always use the story. I have a grandma that wakes up every morning and has her coffee with her iPad, and then another one I don't even think ever used a typewriter. Different generations, even within the own generations, have different rules. And so it's all contextual. So, I worked for Council on Aging where we sent over 2,000 paper newsletters each month. That's just how we have to communicate. Some of them had email, but there was like 56 people on the email list when I was there. And I'm like, why do we send an email? But really tracking success, which I think a lot of people maybe don't do as much with their direct mail campaigns. Like, I'm like, oh, well, someone sent a check in. Oh, great. What prompted that? Like, oh, we don't know. We don't keep track of that separately. It's just a check showed up and we celebrate it. And so really looking to see, is it direct mail? Are people scanning your QR code and giving online? Like, what is kind of getting them in the door? And could we do more of that, less of something else? So really evaluating actually where your gift comes from and when it comes in, rather than, looking at necessarily like dollar amounts or, months, gifts per month. You got to track a little more data than just, hey, we got to check, where did it come from and why?
So one other thing that's happening that we got out of this report is that donor confidence is rising, and 79% of donors plan to give the same or more in 2025. Only 14% plan to cut back, and about 2/3 of those cited personal financial concerns or inflation. And so what can you do to kind of retain trust with donors? Or in some cases, with donors who have fallen away and become lapsed donors, how can you regain trust with donors?
So when I'm thinking about donor confidence, we want general confidence to be high because we want folks to feel good about giving, but we particularly want them to feel good about giving to our organization. So when I'm thinking about making sure that I'm building sort of a baseline of trust with donors, there are a few things that I keep in mind. And the biggest one, it really all comes down to transparency, being as transparent as you can when you can. So, for example, if you have a matching gift, tell me who it's from. Don't tell me it's an anonymous donor. Don't tell me that it has no dollar cap. I know that's not true. I would ideally have the name of the person giving, but I would at least know.
The 8 times matching gift without a ceiling isn't real.
I know.
From the anonymous donor.
But that's exactly it. We are seeing more and more of that. 5x ask, 6x ask.
Yeah,
I know you can do that in politics, but this is nonprofit. You can't do that here.
Yeah.
Let's be real about it. I mentioned earlier wrapping back on actions that you've asked people to take, just demonstrating to your donors, hey, you send us a petition, we're doing something with that.
Yeah.
It builds trust, and it builds it's not exactly two-way communication, but a little bit. And that's always helpful. Colton mentioned earlier acknowledgments. Make sure your acknowledgments are going out. That's a huge thing. And update your copy a few times a year. If you update your copy quarterly,
please,
you are ahead of the curve. But you have donors, I guarantee you, who are giving to you more than once a year.
Yeah.
And just even changing the opening paragraph of your acknowledgement, so when someone gets it, they know it's not the same thing, goes a long way. And then one other thing is, we always encourage you to try things you haven't tried before. And when you do that, there is a level of risk.
Yep.
So particularly if you're trying a new type of fundraising, maybe you're doing phone calls or you're texting or something, put something on your website, on your social media, where people can make sure it's you. It's an FAQ. It's just a post on Facebook that says, hey, we're starting our annual telefundraising drive today. You might get a call, kind of thing, so that people know it's legitimate and that they can trust it and they can provide you feedback. Be honest. We're trying something new. Let us know what you think, and then be open to receiving that feedback, because there will be positives and there will be negatives. And one other thing about receiving feedback, make sure that the people at your organization who are interfacing directly with donors, so think receptionists, whoever runs your social media, make sure they know what's going on. You have a direct mail package going out, your receptionist should have a copy. Because then when people start calling and saying things like, hey, I got this, that person doesn't say, you got what? What are you talking about? Like, we're painting a more cohesive picture for donors where everyone at the organization knows what's going on. We know that's not the reality, but very simple email to your team, letting them know a package is dropping, can go a long way in sort of making that donor experience more cohesive.
Yeah, I think that's great. And the takeaway that we originally talked about when we were prepping this episode from this idea of donor confidence and generational shifts was that a lot of organizations are now turning to AI. And what we want to say to everybody is just hold on a second, just slow down, make sure your fundamentals are in place. To Samantha's earlier point, we work with a lot of organizations where just the very basic fundamentals of the program need to be in place first before you start layering on complexities, especially with AI. And if you are going to start to put in place some rather technologically advanced ways of maybe identifying ways to speak with donors and identify ask amounts and things like that, please make sure that your basics are in place and you have a good foundation to then start to put in place things that might be more advanced. So that's the baseline advice that we would give to people. And, we are true believers that technology will do great things for fundraising. Right now, we're still kind of in the Wild West of a lot of it. And people are figuring it out. And we're at a very, very difficult time right now in fundraising, because I think there's a lot of organizations that are watching their numbers go down and they're getting scared. And these companies see an opportunity to come in and say, you know what, we've got this magic bullet. And if you just sign up with us, we can help you figure it out. And we're seeing on our end a lot of folks coming to us after experimenting with that and having it not worked out.
Absolutely. And I would say if you're considering a program like that, you'd better be able to say exactly how your 0 to 12 month donors performed on your last mailing compared to your 13 to 24 month donors compared to your 25 to 36 month donors. And you better show me how your mail packages this year were not exactly the same as your mail packages last year.
Yep.
If you can do those two things, then you can start getting creative with AI and other sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Before we get into the end of this podcast, It is important to note that the Giving USA report explicitly outlines the scope and limitations of its research. It is a national, not regional focus. And so these report findings are estimates for the entire United States. They do not include regional and state level giving. And so keep that in mind as you're looking at Giving USA every year, not just this year, but every time this report comes out, please keep that in mind. Use this report as a baseline for macro level understanding, and please supplement it with local data. Colton does a fantastic job in looking at local data and helping his local nonprofits and regional nonprofits understand what is going on in their own backyard and using those local data points and insights to inform their specific fundraising strategies.
Absolutely. 100% agreed.
All right. Well, gang, it's almost time for us to go. But before we do, I'd like to ask, what is maybe one thing you'd like listeners to take away from this conversation? It can be something we talked about or something that hasn't come up yet.
I like to end each podcast with trying to get canceled by the profession.
I do that with almost every podcast, Colton.
So in looking at these recommendations from the Giving USA report, I guess my initial feedback was tell me something I don't know.
Yeah.
Focus on donor retention, engage next gen, think about giving methods. I'm like, all right, cool. It's the same piece of advice we've been sharing for many years. And I think the one to really be mindful of, though, is diversify funding and strategies, particularly with cuts to government grants and other types of funding. Some businesses may not be sponsoring at the levels they used to. And so organizations really need to think beyond just their fundraising strategies to help cover the costs of doing their programs. And so, yes, the recommendations are the same we've been talking about for a long time, but I think now people are like, oh yeah, no, you really mean it. I really do need to get on that. And so I would say going back to the basics on some things, revisiting that with your direct mail, making sure it's not the same letter you sent out in 1989. To really focus on modernizing some things, thinking about people and their approaches, and really how to build stronger connections with folks. And I say doing a little bit different here and there can make a big impact. And so whether you're using an outside vendor or you're doing your own direct mail or whatever, just giving it a little facelift and refresh could be really beneficial. And I think that's in terms of the takeaways. It's we really mean these recommendations this time. And we have some examples of where some folks didn't listen and now they're having financial crises. So I would just say, look at what you're doing, Giving USA aside, and seeing what's your process, what are the steps, have any of you even made an online gift to your agency? I get some of the most templated cold emails here is your receipt. Thank you for giving.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we sent you an e-receipt. And I'm like, well, okay. So really thinking about that relationship and building it and, actually listening to the recommendations and seeing what that looks like for you. It doesn't mean revolutionize your whole agency, but a few little tweaks here and a little fresh coat of paint never hurt anybody.
Excellent.
I couldn't agree more, Colton. And what I will add to that then is what gets measured improves. So measure, track, even if you don't have goals yet, even if all you're doing is tracking how things have been going, I guarantee you there are insights there that you just don't know because you're not looking. So maybe you're starting simple. You're just creating those two main segments we talked about, your current donors and your lapsed donors. You're talking to them differently and you're seeing how they perform differently. From there, you can start getting more granular. Instead of just having 0 to 12 and kind of everyone else, start breaking it into 12-month increments. You can try 6-month increments. We've generally found that once you get past 2 years, you can just do 12-month increments. And then from there, you can get more fancy, but I am fully convinced that segmenting, messaging, and tracking by recency alone, just to get you started, it's going to improve most nonprofits pretty drastically. And then again, from there, start looking at things like, have they been to an event recently? Another really easy one is direct mail donors versus non-direct mail donors. If someone has never given a gift to you via direct mail, try them for about 2 years. If they still don't give, they're not going to.
Yeah.
Like there are recent donors even, or semi-lapsed donors that maybe direct mail is not a good vehicle, but events are great, or they're going to give to an email or whatever. You can start getting more sophisticated, but start simple, start tracking, and you will find some natural ways to improve your program.
Excellent. So here's my big takeaway from our conversation today and the report in general and how we see things moving. For years and years, I was kind of the mindset that annual giving hasn't changed that much, and we really do see it shifting. And the role of annual giving, I think, is shifting pretty dramatically. And really, what's happening for folks who are in the trenches is you're doing two jobs now, two distinct jobs. And the first is to kind of basically do what you've always done. You run a traditional program where you're doing direct mail. You might be running a phone program alongside that, and you're doing digital. So you're doing this multi-channel program for fundraising, and you're always trying to beat your past projects and your old goals. And it's burnout city. It's how it's always been, and that part hasn't changed, other than the fact that there's fewer people participating and it's tougher to get donors on board and keep them on board. And so it's more difficult than it's ever been. At the same time, and we've talked a lot about this in a number of episodes that we've done this year, there is this renewed focus and this renewed importance of stewardship and relationship building that used to be kind of the domain of the people who were focused on stewardship and those higher end donors, those major gifts officers, capital campaign folks. They were the ones who were really focused on relationship building. And that really has become more so the domain, and it's trickled down into annual giving. It is more important than ever to make sure you're building relationships, even at the lower levels, with your donors. And we know for a fact that our donors are interested in being emotionally connected to these organizations. And so as annual giving folks, we want to do that through storytelling. We want to do that through good stewardship. We want to do that through making people feel connected to our mission, our vision, and the work that we're doing on the ground. And we can't always just leave that up to marketing and communications to do that. So if you work in an organization where you have the ability to be a conduit to your mission and vision, and you can be the one who's helping to tell those stories of the work that's happening and connect your donors emotionally, that is going to be super important to having a strong program, having strong fundraising, and being able to have a successful program. So that is really an opportunity, I think, for everybody, because you're going to get burnt out just working your regular program. It's getting harder and harder and harder, but it is very, very rewarding to be on that other side of things, connecting people to your mission and vision, telling the stories. That's kind of the part of the job where you can get a little bit energized, and you can get a sense of renewal about the work you're doing.
Heck yeah.
Heck yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Colton and Samantha, for all your contributions today. Really enjoyed this conversation and talking about Giving USA's report. If listeners want to continue the conversation with you, where can they contact you? Colton.
You can visit my website at coltonstrawser.com, and you can also feel free to follow me on LinkedIn and reach out there.
Excellent. And Samantha, people know where they can find you. They find you at ipmadvancement.com.
That's right, ipmadvancement.com. I am also on LinkedIn. You can feel free to message me, but IPM is really the best place to go to get a hold of me.
Well, thank you so much. You are both superstars, and listeners, we value your input. So please reach out to us and let us know how we're doing. If you have specific suggestions for topics or guests, or you have feedback about this episode, email us NPFX suggestion to contact@ipmadvancement.com. Thank you to our esteemed producer, Curtis Schmidt, and thank you to everyone for listening and tuning in. We'll see you next time on the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange.
That concludes this episode of the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. Thanks to our panel for sharing their insights and expertise. If you'd like to learn more about our panel members or any of the organizations or resources featured in this episode, we will include links in the show notes. If you like this podcast, we would love your help spreading the word. First, please subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app so you always know when a new episode is released. Second, forward the episodes you like to friends and colleagues or share them on social media. Word of mouth is one of the best ways you can help us reach more nonprofit professionals like yourself. And if you use Apple Podcasts or Audible, please leave us a review. Positive reviews are how many listeners decide whether or not to try out a new podcast. We appreciate your help. For suggestions on topics, guests, or nonprofit organizations you'd like to hear on the podcast, send an email with the subject heading NPFX suggestion to contact@ipmadvancement.com. For back episodes and more resources like white papers, infographics, and blog articles, please visit the free IPM Advancement Nonprofit Resource Library at ipmadvancement.com/resources. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.